Welcome to the Windy City Meeples podcast, a podcast about board game and all things tabletop. I'm your host, Shane Gordon, and with me, my co-host,
Kyle Huzzy.
and we're here to just talk to you about all things board games and life and just enjoy this whole ride. Welcome to our first podcast. So what do you think we can expect from this podcast, Kyle?
Yeah, I was hoping, since I know we're both pretty big into the board games, and there's a lot of good ones coming up here in the next this 2021, right? So, I think we'll have game reviews on here, maybe some what we like, what we don't like, and maybe just a mixture of kind of what board gaming brings to our lives.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I agree. Like, there's so much that it does to enrich your life and enrich the lives of the people around you. Like, and there's so many, like you said, so many things coming out. It's just, this is a great industry that's just expanding, and the ideas are just brilliant, and it's just an exciting time.
Right. I know board games in particular, it's one of those things where it was almost kind of in the closet a couple of years back, right? People wouldn't talk so much about it, and I just see a lot more excitement and more of the general public talking about games that you'd never would expect.
Well, and I mean, our listeners can't see, but as we can see each other, we're displaying our games behind us. You see shelves of games, you see things highlighted. And it's funny you said closet, because growing up, there was a board game closet for me. All the games like Candyland and Monopoly and Risk, they're all just tucked up in this top shelf of a closet. And whenever you want a game, it was the board game closet that you went to. So they've come out of the closet, that's for sure.
That's right. And now onto display.
Yes. They also have better artists than they did back in the day.
So I guess, yeah, just that can kind of dive us into our first topic here about kind of who we are and why do we play board games? How did we get into them? You mentioned there as a kid growing up, you guys had that board game closet. So how did this hobby grow for you?
Well, I'll be honest that the board game closet back in the day almost killed it for me. I mean, the staples of Sorry, Monopoly, Candyland, like these things were just not exciting games to play. I mean, I really like what got into it for me, I guess, is I got into Magic the Gathering. And as I hung out at local game stores playing Magic at events and stuff, I started noticing other people playing different games. Like there'd be a table playing a board game, and it'd be like, well, that looks really cool. Like, what is that? And so that's, to me, how I got into it. I just started seeing them and then started asking questions. Sometimes, even before or after event, I would try and jump into a game with people, try some new stuff out. And that's about how I got into it. The love of it came from that.
So then would you say board gaming for you was a little bit later in life that you kind of picked that up?
I would say it was definitely into my 30s that I got back into it. I mean, I kind of liked playing games as a kid, but like I said, the games were, I didn't know about the way the games are now. I was in the Walmart brand, Milton Bradley, Parker Brothers, all before they became under the Hasbro gaming family. But they're really simple, a lot of house rules.
Yes.
Which I find like house rules, the majority of the time, ruin a game. It's basically taking a part of the game like, that's too tough for me. I'm going to dumb it down and make it so now I can just win all the time.
Yeah, I think you could spend an hour talking about how much Monopoly was house ruled. Does anyone ever play that game right?
I don't even think anyone knows the real rules anymore, like the house rules. Like, the first time I read the rules, I was like, what do you mean there's no free parking that you get money at? Like
people don't just hand free money out to you? What?
Yeah. But that, I don't know a single person that doesn't house rule that. But yeah, so that's where I came into it. Just through Magic, I craved social interaction. I remember seeing Magic back in the day, and I just got into it because I saw it was still a thing once I started spending more time in more local game stores. Got into it, and then that led to board games. I saw all this other stuff, and I'm like, man, there's a whole world here that was never there when I was growing up or I didn't know about.
Right.
So how about yourself?
I guess where it started for me, I think we kind of had the same thing with the board game closet. I think that everyone's beginning still the same. The Monopoly, the Sorry, Risk was another big one there too. And played a little bit as a kid growing up, and then probably when I got to university, it was you're trying to find different things to do. You're tired of just drinking all the time or going to your classes. You're looking to switch it up a little bit. So we started with those very classic games. I think we were on our second game of Monopoly, and it had to be banned outright because it was almost causing fistfights over things.
For
And
sure.
we try to take it to the next level, like I guess house ruling things, but to the fact where we're kind of creating our own ecosystem where it's like, well, I'll 50% own this, you 50% own this, we won't pay each other, but then the next guy will pay us, and start making all these like counteractive deals. So looking back at it now, I think I was always a heavy board game player, but without having the right tools to do so, right? So we're trying to add this complexity level to Monopoly that didn't exist, right? So
Yeah.
trying to find more depth into something that's more light. And I know at some point, I'm sure we'll get into a light versus heavy kind of discussion and what the difference is, pros and cons.
Yeah.
But I think definitely myself, I prefer more of those heavy games and trying to find depth. So the one game that did stick around a little bit was Risk. And I don't know if it was just I had a competitive group of friends. Or what, but we got to the fact where people literally had to be banned from their cell phones because everyone's making secret little alliances like under the table, like a little wink, a little stare. And again, like you kind of mentioned, that social dynamic, I think it really built up that there's more than just the rules of the game that's going on. There's also the people at the table and those connections, and whether you're being aggressive or forming partnerships or what deals, that kind of stuff, right? Board games really create that dynamic where it's not just a set of rules you're following. It's almost like I don't know if I want to say lifestyle, if that seems too vague or not, but it's a different environment, right, when you're in the middle of playing a game with people.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, it breeds so much interaction with people, and on different levels too. Like it's usually not just chit chat fluff. It's kind of dives into what the game is about, and you start talking about more philosophical things. I find with games, like even if it's talking about what move is right and what move is wrong, there's just such a strategy and depth and more complexity to your interaction with a person than just what you normally would sitting over coffee, catching up. Like it just, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get another topic to dive into one day, is kind of that party game dynamic, and I see a lot of that. I'm sure you've played Resistance, Shane.
Yeah, I own a copy of Resistance and Cuckoo.
Yeah, I think yeah, those are ones where you really see other sides of people, that kind of getting political without getting too political kind of thing, right? And like you said, I do agree there that there's kind of that extra dimension of depth, and I think you even learn things about yourself and some of the decisions you make that you might not really have known on the surface.
Oh yeah, and if you want to get political, you can pull out Secret Hitler and
there you go.
See it, and then you can get really political.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you kind of discovered what drew you into them. What do you, at the moment, what do you think is your favorite game, and kind of like why?
Yeah, so favorite game, it's interesting. I think it's one of those things like favorite color, where different day of the week, depending on who's asking me and what mood I'm in, I'm going to give you a different answer.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And that's what's really cool about board games. There's so many different styles and methods for play, right? Like you have your heavy strategy games, you have your deck builders, you have those lighter games we talked about, those party games, right? But I guess if I had to pick one right now, again, I mentioned earlier on that I really like the more heavy complexity, trying to solve that puzzle outlook. So right now, actually, Aeon's End is probably one of my favorite games at the moment. it. For anyone
Okay.
not familiar, it is a deck builder where you and a few other portal mages are trying to basically defend the last settlement of humanity against these different kind of monsters. And each boss you fight, it's a boss battle or deck builder if you really had to break it down, but it's
Yeah.
a very difficult game. I've read lots of Reddit posts, just people talk about how hard different bosses are, and I think I've lucked out enough that we've been on a little bit of a hot streak, but it always seems to come down to that final turn of who gets to go first, and sitting around the table having that like moment where you flip over a card and you're like, please let it be one of us, please let it be one of us, and you just get it and you're like, yes, we can win. Or the bad guy flips up and you've now lost and you're like, well, there goes the last 40 minutes. But that's the good thing too. If you lose, it's not like you spent 4 hours doing that. I'm sure we'll discuss Gloomhaven later on, and I love that game as well, but we can spend 6 hours on it and you might have one success, right? So it's nice that if you are going to lose, you didn't commit like 3 hours to it. And then you can, because of the deck builder nature of it, every time you play, it can be a little different experience.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I have played that with you, and I do enjoy it. It's different because I'm usually not a co-op guy, I found. So I know it's cooperative.
Yes.
And it takes a little bit to get into the competitive magic juices get in there, but I tame them back, but no, it's definitely a good game. It's something that you've shown to me and brought into my life, and I definitely enjoy it. And I don't want to get sucked into that void though, because there's a lot of them.
Yes, that there is, and Kickstarter has definitely attacked me on that one. It's how I first discovered the game, and then I went back and tracked every single expansion and base version of that game. So besides a couple odd promo cards, I have kind of the whole collection of that game. Me and my wife are playing through Legacy. I think we're about halfway through, and that's kind of cool because you're building your mage kind of as you go, and there's a bit more of an overarching story, right? So it's been fun to have that experience. I'm I'm just thinking there's a million things to add to this, but there's pros and cons of those legacy games too, right? I absolutely love and adore them, but sometimes it's just getting them to the table, especially right now in this COVID world, right? That can make some of that more difficult.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I know that there's a ton of games I want to get to the table that are sitting on the shelves behind me because of COVID, because board game nights are shut down, board game cafes are shut down. Like, and then it just becomes you and your household, which for me is just me and my wife,
Right.
very similar to you. And so you're kind of at the whim of your partner sometimes. And my partner's been pretty open to a bunch of stuff, but she, I don't know, I can't get Gloomhaven to the table with her. She's still leery. I got Stuffed Fables open the other day, and she seemed to kind of enjoy that. So maybe that's a gateway, but it definitely plays different than Gloomhaven, but it has some similarities. But
so Stuffed Fables, that was an enjoyable experience for the first go.
it is. It was a little frustrating because sometimes you can get overwhelmed learning a game.
Yeah.
And I decided to not learn it myself and then kind of teach her. I decided, like, let's learn it together, and like she can take some of the rules and read them, so it was a new way of doing something, but overall it was an enjoyable experience. It was something she's willing to do again and wants to do again. So
right.
I mean, she's opened up in that way, but the COVID, like you said, is really shut down. Like, I got games that only really play well with 4 or 5 people.
Right.
You don't get that to the table anymore with just 2. Especially games that rely on like attacking different people. Really become one-on-one. It's not built that way.
Right. And I guess for anyone that isn't familiar with Stuffed Fables and Gloomhaven, I would kind of categorize them as dungeon exploration games, right? On a grid based.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely grid-based. Different mechanics, but definitely.
And there's some narrative to both games as well, right?
Yes. I will say, a lot heavier narrative from what I've seen of Stuffed Fable than Gloomhaven.
That's cool. That sounds really exciting.
Yeah. definitely there's more reading of a story. So it's pretty cool.
And
So
how
yeah.
about yourself, Shane? What would you say is your favorite game at the moment?
Well, right now, it's definitely. I mean, I definitely love it anyways, and it has an amazing table presence. But it's Starling City Games, or sorry, Starling Games, not Starling City. Everdale. I saw it at a Falcon, which is a board game convention up in our neck of the woods, and I had seen it on Kickstarter before and let it pass. But then at Falcon, my wife saw it. And she's like, "That game looks amazing," and it happened to be back on Kickstarter with the expansion, so I kickstarted the whole thing. It is a deck. Well, I wouldn't say deck builder. It is a hand management, resource management, worker placement type of game. So any of those aren't familiar, it has, for its table present, it has this giant wooden tree. If you got the special Kickstarter edition, this wooden tree where all the cards sit underneath it, and then you got this board of this meadow below it where all your resources sit in different piles, where there's a berry patch, so all the berries sit there. There's like a log dam, so all the logs are there, and then the other resources are also scattered around this river bank. And in the center, you just have cards that you can play or pick, so it's almost like an extended hand for you, and you have also a hand of cards in your hand. And you just place your workers around the board, collecting resources so that you can play these cards from the meadow, they call it, in the center of the board, or from your hand to build a city of up to 15 cards. And I don't know, I find there's lots of strategy, there's lots of little combos in there, because like there's buildings cards and there's people cards, and they kind of like, if you have the right building card, you can play the person for free. But if you have this person, you might be able to play this other person for free. So there's little strategies and combos you can get into. I find there's as much depth as you want. It can be super light, fun little thing, or you could actually start looking for combos and be a little bit more strategic. Plus, there's little bonuses you can go for, and then I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I think
We love it.
so. I've had the opportunity to play Everdale with Shane and his family once, and from my experience, first time coming into a game, first of all, that table presence, like you said, I think that really attracts even non-gamers to the world, because they're like, "What's this tree? What are these squishy little berries and stuff?" Right? So it really has that aesthetic, visual, approach where people will enjoy it that way, and I like that the different levels you said, because I would say, Shane, for me and you, we're probably a bit more heavy than maybe the average gamer in our group when it comes to our complexity of games.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting around the table playing playing this game, and it was actually Shane's wife. She's like, you pick up on games really fast. Like, it seems like you know what you're doing after like 4 turns. And again, I end up losing the game, which I'll get to here in a second. It ended up being pretty awesome. But so we had this really awesome experience where you're kind of building this engine and you're trying to look ahead to different seasons. And I do think that game has a little bit for everyone, right? And even if you don't win, you can have a positive experience. And like Shane mentioned, that you get these like 15 squares to your city that you're trying to build up between people and buildings. And I basically had this thing set up where I felt like I was going to be unbeatable, right? I had my last move left to do, and I don't even remember what the card was called, but next thing, Shane passes over a little card, and it says, "Here, this is in your city now." Was it like a town fool? I think
It's
the
the
card
fool,
was.
yeah.
The
It's the
fool.
fool. Yeah.
And it completely wrecked everything. I went from thoughting I was going to win this game for sure, and I love that so much. Obviously, in the moment, you sit there, you grumble, you complain, you might get a little bit salty, but afterwards, you're like, that was an epic experience. Like, not only are you sitting there, one of my biggest complaints about games is if they end up like solitaire, like you're just doing your thing and you don't really interact with other players. And that's what I really liked about Everdale, because you had that mixture of, okay, you're kind of doing your own thing, depending on where you place your workers, that can block other people. But that little fool card, right? There's not a lot of them in that deck, but it's just enough that it can throw you off of your strategy, right? But at the same point, you're not spending every turn trying to mess up another player. So I think it's can be more of a gateway for non-gamers to get into as well.
And that's a good point, because in my experience, as I've gotten into this, like, there are people who are just solitaire players. They want to sit around a table with 4 guys or girls, and basically, I'm going to do my thing, you're going to do your thing, and whoever has the best strategy is going to win at the end of the game. But you're not going to affect me. And
Right.
That's okay in a way, but when you get to someone who knows that game well, it's never fun to play with them, because they're going to just destroy everybody. They know where to go, what to do. They've got this whole thing mapped out. And to me, that, I don't know, winning all the time is not fun for me. I know that sounds weird because everybody wants to win, but I mean, that's one of the things I love about Magic, is that, like, even the pros only have like a 60, like a mid 60 to maybe low 70% win percentage. Like, they're not running away with it. Like, how many people have won the Pro Tour multiple times is very rare. Like, so it's the fun of learning from your defeats, I find. I mean, there's some games I play where I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just doing moves because I'm interacting and having fun with people. I'm just enjoying that. And then there's, after I lose a bunch of times at that game, I might be like, okay, next time I play it, I'm going to look more into what I'm doing and plan things out and look at strategies. And that's what I love about it. I mean, the solitaire thing, I get it. Some people love it, but I love the interaction. I love that I could have something planned, like you said, and this one card just foils that plan. Because, I mean, it didn't destroy you either.
No.
All it did was tip the balance that I won, you didn't, but it was still super close.
Yes, yeah.
And, like, that's all it was. It's not like I've played games. Actually, a game I really love, I'll just mention it, that my wife and I have loved. I picked up off of Facebook, a guy that both of us have known that played Magic. He's selling this Kickstarter game with an artist that I love. This Micho guy. He does all this art for Garphill games. If you ever played, like, anybody out there has played like the North Sea Saga or the West Kingdom Saga, I just love this guy's art, and so I'm like, I'm going to try this game. It's a worker placement with dice. It's this guy's art, and me and my wife loved the game, I think, because we understood it. But I took it to a game night before this whole COVID thing, and the one guy playing decided to try a different strategy.
Okay.
And he was eliminated from the beginning of the game. Like, once he tried that strategy and didn't try to correct it in the first few turns, he was so far behind that he was never a factor in the game ever again. And that thing, I don't like that. I don't like when you make one mistake so early in a game that your game's no longer fun. You know you're not going to win. You're not even going to be competitive. You've become a non-factor. So I'm starting to learn that in games. And like with the Everdale thing, that wasn't the fact. That even if I'd placed that card earlier in the game, would have been a non-factor for you. You would have had some way of maybe getting rid of it, or change your strategy to build around it. It wasn't a thing that tanked you. It tanked you in that instant because it was the one kill shot, I guess. But it's not something built into the game where if it happens at the beginning of the game, you're done.
Right.
And so I'm learning that with game design too. When I'm seeing games now, like, oh, like, they should have some kind of mechanism that keeps it close.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take, right? Because I know both me and Shane, haven't talked about it as much, but I play Magic the Gathering as well, and Commander is a format where you can play multiplayer, and there's a lot of I guess self-guiding policies without there being catch-up rules, right? Like, if someone's lagging really far behind, well, that player just probably gets a couple free turns of not being interacted with. At least in our group, I know there's cutthroat groups out there that would eliminate that player on the spot, but
kill the weak.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's funny that within our group we kind of naturally police ourselves to the person that's lagging behind. We give them a break, and you're right? Some of the board games have that naturally built in where people can kind of get back into it, and ironically, the last couple games of Magic we have played, I'm pretty sure the person who we left alone is the person who ends up winning. So maybe we're doing the strategy wrong.
Maybe.
But I think you're right. It's nice to see games that have that built in, because no one wants to play a 90-minute game and in the first 15 minutes they're like, well, I have no way of winning, right? Like that makes a pretty sour experience.
And yeah, and I felt really bummed when we played that, because this is something this game, actually I didn't even mention what it's called. It was called Rise of Nobility. Um, it really bummed me because my wife and I have had so many positive experiences with it and like really enjoyed playing it. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to bring it to these guys. They're going to love it. It's a great game. And then just to see that this guy was like devastated.
Right.
Because he's like, well, I'm going to do this strategy. And it's like, well, if you do that, if you do anything but kind of the path the game wants you to go on, you're not going to compete. And that kind of soured me a little bit to it. I mean, my wife and I, because we'll play that way, will still be good for us. But now I know it's not something, because I don't want to limit. I don't want to go to a game and be like, hey guys, here's how to play the game. And it doesn't tell you that, but this is what you got to do in your first 4 turns.
Right.
I want people to. That's one thing I love about games is you make your own path. I don't want, like Monopoly. When we go back to the old games, there is no other path. Like basically get Park Place, get Boardwalk, put up a bunch of houses, make everybody go bankrupt. Basically, just focus on a side of the board even.
Right.
Because the chances of people skipping that whole side are. The statistics are in your favor of them landing on one of your hotels or houses or whatever. So I like the newer games, like I said, like Everdale, like Aeon's End. You forge your own path, whether it's through like the deck building of Aeon's End, you're picking what cards to play your own game. Everdale, you're picking where you want to go to get what resources to build what you want to build. And where you want to go, like, and I know we're focusing on those 2 games because we're just like those are our top games at the moment. But a lot of the games we play are like that. You make your choices to forge your path, and hopefully that's your path to victory. Where it's not, like I said, it's not like Monopoly or Sorry. Like Sorry's even worse. It's like,
right, yeah,
get your guy around the board and into there. There's one path to victory. Get your guy around, screw your opponent, and that's the game. So I don't know. That's why I think I've fallen in love with board gaming so much in these later years, when I've discovered I guess what started as the European games, they called it, like when Catan came out and stuff like that. Those are like Dominion. They're games that showed people that, hey, here's a different way of playing. Here's a way where you're involved all the time. That's another thing I don't like is player elimination.
right.
Like Risk was bad and Monopoly were bad for that. Where it's like, hey, you're out and this game's going to last 4 more hours, so go watch some TV or go home or whatever, right? But like when they brought in like Catan and Dominion and stuff, the first kind of wave, you play to the end and you choose your own path. Like there's no way saying this is how you got to go. It's like, I don't know. I love that, being able to forge your own path. I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm a control freak and want to control everything. I don't know, but
that forge your own path and even multiple ways of victory. I mean, if you look at, if you've ever played the Civilization as the video game, right? I know we're mainly about board games, but there's like 8 different ways you can win in that, right? You can have your military, you can go through war, you can go through science, and I think you're right. Like seeing that in board games where you have more choice, more freedom. I think that makes people want to return to the table and play again. And you've even seen Risk a little bit has even tried to evolve, right? Like they do their legacy. They have the Godstorm was the first, I think. Risk Godstorm, I think, was the first non traditional board game I bought, right? Because I'm like, what? We can play Risk in different ways, and your units could die and go to the underworld and like make their way back. Like to me, that was like mind blowing. I'm like, there's more to this basic game now. Like it's adding more depth, and like I said, I think that was the first board game I purchased outside of those traditional board games, and it just kind of opened up a new pathway to kind of see what's out there. I know another big one. It's kind of funny because we went from those traditional games to Arkham Horror very quickly. We didn't really have a lot of gateway games in between, but the guys I lived with in university, we were pretty competitive, and we liked the heavier kind of games, mostly video games at that point. But we found kind of Arkham, and we just got addicted to it. I think we'd play for like 8 hours at a time, like every Saturday for like months. And to this day, it's probably one of the board games I've logged the most games into. And it was all about that, again, it's that cooperative thing. You'll notice a lot of the games I talk about, I really like that cooperative element because we're bringing people together, whether we're trying to fight a monster or, beat some Marvel or DC villain, but it's trying to come together. And to me, I think I like that companionship that, because taking an aside here, in the natural world, I think people don't come together enough. I think we're so divided on whether it's political things, whether it's your culture, whether it's whatever it is, your anxiety even. But to have, games have an opportunity to bring people together to, defeat a common enemy, right? And some of those games can have like little traders in it or little twists, which those are great too. But I really like the togetherness games that bring us all together. And at the end of the day, we either all win together or we all lose together, which can be frustrating in itself. But I think that's kind of what I liked, was the bringing this together. High school went pretty well for me, but I think at the start of university, I felt kind of scared of the world. Like I felt like I had everything figured out in high school, and then university came, and I'm like, what do you mean I'm not the top student at this anymore? I'm like near the bottom or whatever. Like you kind of see how scary the world can actually be. So I think board games became kind of a safe haven to come together with other people and, like I said, take down that common foe. And I honestly think that even through playing board games and Magic as well, it kind of led down that line to me. I think it really helped build confidence.
Oh, I for sure can see that. It. I guess I really don't know what to say there, but I could see how it would. I mean, you're especially like you're talking in university, and you're in a whole new world. Because I know you moved away from home and went to a different city, and you don't really know a ton of people. And then once you start getting involved in stuff like board games, like we met through Magic.
Yes.
You and I. So, I mean, you start going to these things and you just start socializing, and when you're in the situation with a board game and that, you do build confidence in who you are, and you feel comfortable, and it's so great for your mental health, in my opinion, especially like when they were talking COVID here and they wanted to shut down the game stores and stuff, but Walmart and all that was open. I was just like, man, my mental health is just as important. I need those new board games. I need that new Magic set. Like, that's just as important to me as going to get some groceries.
Right. Yeah. Finding those different levels. Yeah, it's interesting how that all comes together, right? Like, and the angle we take to it, even the health that can come through playing board games, right? Like to me, like you said, it gave me that confidence. For some of us, it keeps us going, like something to look forward to, almost an escape too. One of my first jobs that I love to this day was at a movie theater, and people say, well, why do you like working there? And of course there was the free movies, which was awesome, but there was the connection to providing. I used to tell people, now here I am at 16 years old, being like, I like to provide people with an escape from their own world, their own troubles, 2 hours to sit down and completely get away with whatever their stressors or whatever might be, right? I would say the same thing about board games, but I would add it also gets you away from screen time because I know way
Oh,
too many of us spend way too many time on our screens. So you get that escape for a couple hours, and you also get a chance to hopefully decrease your blue light consumption. But obviously, with COVID, I know a lot of people are playing board games online, so that doesn't
I was just
always
about
come
to
into
say
play.
that. I was just about to say that's something I have avoided.
Right.
There's some groups that are like, oh, we're gonna play on tabletopopia or whatever it's called, or
Yeah.
tabletop simulator, or these different things. I'm just like, that's not the same. Like, it's just, it doesn't give me the social interaction. It is just staring at a screen, which it does make me tired. It changes
Right.
my mood. Like, I notice if I play my little AFK arena on my phone, laying on the couch, I'm ready to go to sleep within like 10 minutes. But if I put it down and get up and go doing something, I'm like, now I'm wide awake. So yeah, that blue light consumption is no joke. Like, and I think board games are a great way to get away from it, to keep the interaction, and it definitely helps your health. I mean, I know that for a fact. The more I play video games, be on my phone, stare at the computer, the crappier I feel. The more I get out and see somebody and play a game, sit at the kitchen table and do stuff, I just feel way better all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, and obviously we're not a neuroscience health kind of channel
No.
here, but but I think
we're
something
everything.
for everything, right? No, but I think there's something to be said to that oxytocin, right? Like there's that feel good chemical that gets released in our brain, and oftentimes people relate that to physical touch and intimacy. But there's also just being around people, like sitting at that table, passing cards, passing pieces. I think it's making another connection in our brain that we don't otherwise get, and
Yeah.
we get a lot of disconnect. The society was already moving into a way that everyone was kind of doing things online, and I know I'm bad for that myself, and I am working on it. But COVID has not helped, right? Because now people who
No.
weren't doing that are now moving towards that, and hopefully we don't see board gaming as a hobby start to fall back, because we began this podcast talking about how much gaming and board gaming growth we've seen. How it's now proudly hung up on our shelves versus hidden away in the closet, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully COVID doesn't make board gaming take a step back. But at a step forward, it has got me and you to say, hey, we should be talking about games more.
That is true. Let's get off our butts and start a podcast and
I mean, I'm still on my
talk
butt.
about what we love. That is true.
So
But
I was
maybe we
thinking,
could get stand-up desks and do
oh,
the
that's
podcast
right,
that way.
as it grows. Yeah, I thought maybe we could just end off today with maybe talking about some topics we'd like to cover in the future. I don't know, some
Oh, for
things that
sure.
I've thought about even just as we've been talking here. Is upcoming Kickstarters for sure, because we both mentioned Kickstarter today. So I think that
Yeah.
will be a podcast in on itself, perhaps. Something we both talked about here today is playing with your partner. I don't know if that podcast might get us in trouble with our partners and our wives, but I do think that it has enough merit to kind of be its own topic. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there could have different experiences playing with their partner versus playing with their peers, or even people at their local game stores, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I agree. And also, I mean, we'll talk about what we love. We can review games. We're gonna bring all the things that we love of this lifestyle and industry to this podcast. So like you said, there's going to be Kickstarters, because man, there's so many Kickstarters and there's so many things to be excited about, like Frosthaven. And then yeah, like we can talk about the games. Like we kind of mentioned a few of what we're into right now, into some games, and give our thoughts to you. And this is hopefully going to be a podcast where we can get some dialogue. I mean, I'll throw it out there. If you want to come and have some contact with us, I guess, like right now, email will be the way. I mean, I'm pretty soon going to get up a Facebook thing, but windycitymeeples, all one word, at gmail.com is where we can be reached, and also on Instagram at windycitymeeples. So yeah, like we'll invite interaction with us, and let's see where we can go. Let's grow this community and see what we can make of it.
Absolutely. I think I love every comment to just share and really even quiz us a little bit too, right? Like as far as I think me and Shane are concerned, our focus is board games, but literally anything you want to ask or get talking, we'll be there for that and hopefully see how this grows. I do want to throw one more question at you, Shane, kind of a on your toes question. When it comes to, I guess, being a board game player, what do you think is your biggest weakness?
My biggest weakness, I would say, I would say it. I feel it's a pro and a con, but I feel I don't sometimes put into the thought into a game. Sometimes I'm just so more into the experience of just being with friends, joking around, talking about life, catching up while playing the game that sometimes I don't focus in. So there's sometimes I probably played games at a board game meetup that I've missed something amazing in it that I could have experienced or something amazing thing I could have done. Because I mean, to go back to Magic, there's so many times where we're like, man, I just pulled off this amazing combo or this amazing counter or something that won the game, and it's just a memory emblazoned, right? And so I think sometimes, depending on the mood I'm in, I focus more on the people, and I might miss that amazing moment in the game, which maybe I never come back to that game because it was like, it was a so-so experience where, man, this really was a good game, and I missed out because I didn't give the game the respect that I gave the people.
Right, and I think there's another discussion topic too, is the being in the game versus around the table, right? I think that could be a good area. I know for myself, my wife will tell you this one, is sometimes it's about, I don't know if power gaming is the term, but
Yeah.
I often can see, the most optimal move that's on the table. But let's say my wife or friends, they want to make decisions on themselves. And I think I struggle, and I'm working on it, is to, we don't always have to take the optimal move. Let's kind of get on this journey and see where it goes, right? And I know I've gotten glares at the table, and I'm working at being like, it's okay, let everyone kind of do their own thing. And I think that's the downside that's developed in me out of playing all these cooperative games, is I've gotten so naturally to like, okay, this is what we should do as a team. And then that's, the more I play, I think the more kind of that I gave myself a leadership role without being asked, I think is the issue. Because I think when people ask for feedback or what we should do, that's amazing. And that's when I should say those comments. But if that comment doesn't come, maybe I should keep that to myself. And I think part of that's also came from, I think I've taught games to a lot of people. So it's like I want to throw in that extra step, but just to be respectful of everyone's individual game experience and to let people come up with those natural conclusions on their own, right? And that's something I hope to work on more as I get into playing more games.
And I gotta agree with you on that. Actually, I would, after listening to that, I'm like, that probably is one of my biggest faults too. But we've eliminated that in my household by never playing cooperative games. Because my wife's like, don't tell me how to make my play.
That's right.
So now I'm not going to tell you because you could beat me. So
yeah. Sneak peek into playing with your partner there in the last couple minutes.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, man. So I think that was a great day, and I'll say see ya from Shane.
Yeah, bye from Kyle.
Talk to you later. Bye.